This is Game Night with Josh Hennig on 97.3 ESPN and the free mobile app. Now, live from the Matt Black Kia Studios.
What a move!
Here's Josh Hennig.
Ladies and gentlemen, the Philadelphia Eagles are maybe the most injured team in NFL history. And that might not be an exaggeration here on a Friday. On the website right now at 973ESPN.com, they have 2 wide receivers out. They have 2 cornerbacks out. Another wide receiver is doubtful. A offensive lineman is questionable. And they still have to travel to San Francisco to play the 49ers on Sunday Night Football. Oh, man, NBC must be dreading this game. Game Night here on 97.3 ESPN. Good news is the Sixers hired a head coach that the majority of the fan base seems to like. Whether that's a good omen or not, I don't know, but it's nice to know that the majority of the fan base seems to give it a thumbs up. We had a poll question at 973 ESPN on Twitter, posted a little earlier today. Asked the question, thumbs up, thumbs down, Doc Rivers hire. 85% are saying thumbs up. So the new basketball coach gets a thumbs up. The Eagles' inability to stay healthy gets a major thumbs down. Still to come here on Game Night, by the way. We will talk more NFL and college football throughout the show. Former Eagles cornerback Brandon Boykin, I'll ask him if he has any availability for Sunday night because the Eagles might need a cornerback. But he'll join us to talk some college football from the SEC Network. He's got a brand new show, Thinking Out Loud, on the SEC Network Monday nights that he's a part of. Poor guy, he's getting ganged up on. He's the only Georgia Bulldog on the show. He's got 2 Florida Gators chomping at him during the whole show. So we got a lot of college football to get to him coming up at 6:20 tonight here on 97.3 ESPN. PlaySugarHouse.com. Text board is open, 609-403-0973 to get on the conversation. Earlier today on the Sports Bash, Mike Gill, Hunter Birdie got to speak to the one and only Mark Jacks from NBC Sports Philadelphia, Sixers pre- and post-game analyst. And I love what he said about Doc Rivers. There was something specific he said that stood out to me more than anything else about the 76ers hiring Doc Rivers, and that's this.
A player that's been there, has played the game, when you in the huddle, you know this guy's showing up something that he's already been through. You know, that means a lot nowadays to players to have a player in the NBA, a player coach who's been there, done that. And it gives you a little bit more of a different feel when you have 2 superstars and Ben Simmons and Joel Embiid. Now they look almost somebody eye to eye.
I love how he phrased that. He's a former player. He's a former point guard. He knows the league. When he walks into that huddle and he says, we're going to run this play, he's not coming at it from just any other angle. You heard Mark Jackson say earlier today on the Sports Bash that players today have this high level of respect for former players, a level of respect that you could argue is even maybe more than the regular coach. You know, in the past, a lot of the successful coaches in this league, for a stretch of years, they were all guys who, they're either guys who've just been around coaching for a really long time, or they worked their way up. You know, the Eric Spoelstras of the world, for example, the Frank Vogel right now in the NBA Finals, started a video coordinator. Now he's a head coach. Or you had a former player like a Phil Jackson, you know, a guy like a Rudy Tomjanovich. You know, you had different types of coaches who were having success. But as Mark Jackson put it, today's players look at former players in a different way than ever before. And for Doc Rivers, when he turns to Joel Embiid, say, I want you to do this. Or when he turns to Ben Simmons, say, I want you to do that. It's coming from a different world, a different arena, a different level of authority. And I think that's a great point that Mark Jackson brought together earlier. And it gets back to what makes Doug Pederson special, which is he's a former player, a former quarterback. He's somebody who understands how to speak to people. right? He understands how to verbalize things. This is what Eric Davis from the Believe on the 49ers podcast, he joined the Sports Bash yesterday, about Doug Pederson and Carson Wentz.
Coming out that it was a good situation because Doug knows how to speak quarterback. Very few people do. Very few people know how. Even at the NFL head coaching position, there are very few guys that understand how to speak quarterback.
So Doug, as a former quarterback, can speak to Wentz in a way that, as Eric Davis says, other guys can. That's a guy, Eric Davis. He played with a pretty darn good quarterback himself. He won a Super Bowl with Steve Young, who I argue if Steve Young would have played in 2020 instead of 1994, his numbers probably would be double right now. You think that Lamar Jackson and Pat Mahomes look special. You put a guy who led the league in completion percentage for 4 straight years and the 2-time league MVP in the 2020, who's a scrambling quarterback, yeah, he'd be pretty darn good. So Eric Davis is telling you, listen, Doug Pederson is the guy to get Wentz back on track.
I think Doug is an excellent guy to get him through this. I think Doug, the way he understands the quarterback position will give him the confidence to know that he has a talented player there in front of him, that if he can get out of it, he can be the dude for the Eagles for a long time.
So again, you go back to Doc Rivers. It's a similar concept when it comes to guys like Embiid and Simmons. Doc Rivers, as a former player, can speak the language of the player. It's not a knock on Brett Brown. It's not a knock on any other coach who's not a former NBA player, but there's something to be said for they have a level of understanding that maybe someone else doesn't. This was Mark Jackson on Doc Rivers' resume.
If you look at the resume, if you look at a guy that got over 9,000 points, over 4,000 assists, and over 1,000 steals as your new head coach, who's been here, who's had superstars, like I said, made adjustments, I think the positives outweigh the negative anytime.
So you want to know why I'm a fan of the Doc Rivers move? You want to know why I think it's a good idea? It's a similar reason to why I still believe in Doug Pederson. I believe in the players who become coaches, who work their way to become head coaches, and they work their way to be successful. I think there is a very big deal when it comes to former players being able to verbalize certain things to the modern athlete, being able to explain things, being able to say things, having a certain level of gravitas. You know, we always talk about, Carson Wentz hasn't been the same since Frank Reich left. Well, Frank Reich's a former player too. Frank Reich, Captain Comeback, for those who are maybe too young to remember. When he was at Maryland, was in Buffalo, he had some of the greatest comeback victories in football history as a quarterback. He had a nice little career. But because of that career, it put him in position to be a successful NFL coach. Doc Rivers, a former player, become coach. And listen, I'm not guaranteeing you the Sixers win a championship next year. I'm not promising you that the 76ers have it all figured out. But it's a step in the right direction. It just makes a lot of sense in terms of what the 76ers need. And the same thing, by the way, with Doug Pederson. I believe that Doug's going to find a way to get this turned around. I just believe that you don't have the success that Doug had for the last 3 years by accident. This is not Brian Billick taking a team to a Super Bowl, which is one of the greatest defenses in NFL history, or John Gruden taking Tony Dungy's players to the Super Bowl to win a championship against his former team, right? This is not the same. This is not a situation where Tom Coughlin wins a Super Bowl and then has a losing record until he gets fired by the Giants. It's not the same. I don't think Doug Pederson is a flash in the pan. And I think Doc Rivers will also have success in Philadelphia, and he's probably the best coach to put them in a position to win a championship because, like Doug Pederson, these are former players become coaches who can verbalize things to the player in a way that maybe someone who didn't play might not be able to verbalize. And whether it's fair or unfair, a former player understands things. Someone who's played in the NFL, not just somebody who played high school football, okay? Someone who played in the NFL, someone who played in the NBA. You heard Mark Jack say it. Doc Rivers scored 9,000 points in his career. He was a point guard next to Dominique Wilkins. So he played with a human highlight film, right? I mean, Dominique was a freak. He was amazing, right? He's coached everybody from Tracy McGrady to Paul Pierce to Kevin Garnett to all these different guys. He's coached them. He's coached them up. So if you think about it, what has Doc done? He's either played with everybody or he's coached everybody. If this team was ever going to have success with Ben Simmons and Joel Embiid, it's going to be with Doc Rivers. And guess what? If it doesn't work out, if they can't still get along, or whatever the reasoning is, okay, whatever the situation is, Joel Embiid came out last week and said, "Oh, I love Ben Simmons. I love playing with Ben Simmons." All right, obviously we keep having to hear this again and again until they actually have a little more success. But I think that if Doc Rivers can't get the job done with Ben Simmons and Joel Embiid, then it's time to move on from one of them. But you got to give Doc a chance to do it, because if anybody can verbalize it, if anybody can get through to them. Listen, Lob City, if you remember right, was probably on paper a dysfunctional team because Blake Griffin couldn't shoot when he came into the league. DeAndre Jordan was just a dunker and a shot blocker. He didn't really do much else. Chris Paul was basically running a team that didn't really have a competent small forward for half of those years. Doc Rivers has won everywhere he's been. He's made everywhere he has coached better. I expect the same thing in Philadelphia. Again, I'm not guaranteeing you a championship next year. I'm just guaranteeing you a better team playing basketball. PlaySugarHouse.com text board is open, 609-403-0973. Get on the conversation here on Game Night on 97.3 ESPN, 609-403-0973. Still to come on the show. We will be joined by former Eagles cornerback, Georgia Bulldog, Brandon Boykin from the SEC Network. Talk some college football. Also touch on his new show, Thinking Out Loud, Monday nights at 8 p.m. on the SEC Network. Also, we got my college football picks. I'm going to tell you right now, I know I'm 16-11, but I'm going to warn you. You may hear some of these picks, and some of them you may nod your head and be like, yup, that makes sense. Some of these other picks, you may be listening to me right now, and you might say, Josh, you need to relax. Just warning you. Those picks coming up about 20 minutes from now. Also want to remind you, still to come tonight on 97.3 ESPN Game 2 of the NBA Finals, Lakers versus Heat. For those who don't know, contrary to reports of demise, the NBA Finals were the most watched product on television on the other night. The viewership on ABC won ABC the night in terms of viewership across all platforms. If you were so curious, they keep saying the NBA ratings are down. Well, if you take the amount of people who are watching the baseball playoffs and apply them over to the NBA, the numbers don't look so bad. By the way, baseball wasn't even the second most watched show on television that night. No, actually on Wednesday night, just to let you know. The NBA Finals were the most watched thing on television. The second most watched properties were the news channels. The news channels all had booming numbers across the board on Wednesday night. So the reports of the demise of the NBA have been greatly exaggerated. So game 2 tonight, Lakers versus Heat. Bam Adebayo has been ruled out. I know Goran Dragic said he was going to try to play, but it looks like that issue with his foot is a little bit maybe more serious than I believe he's going to try to play. We only know that Adebayo is definitely out, though. There are reports that, Dragic is going to try to play. There's conjecture that he thinks he can fight through it. We'll see what happens. Also, tomorrow on 97.3 ESPN, The Locker Room with Billy Schweim coming up at 10 a.m. Then I'll be on Sports Bash Saturday tomorrow. We got Reed Fowler, DraftKings NFL analyst, and at 1:20, Charlie Ward, the Heisman Trophy winner from Florida State, co-host of the Believe in the ACC podcast. He'll be joining us at 1:20 tomorrow. So a busy Sports Bash Saturday, a busy weekend of football. Eagles on Sunday night. We're bringing you Cowboys versus Browns as the early Sunday game. And on Saturday, we got college football for you. An SEC doubleheader, Alabama versus Texas A&M at 3 o'clock, followed by Georgia versus Auburn. So all big weekend of football. We got a lot of football to get to next here on Game Night on 97.3 ESPN and the 97.3 ESPN mobile app, powered by First Bank of Sea Isle City. I'm Josh Hennig, and this is Game Night.
You're listening to Game Night with Josh Hennig on 97.3 ESPN and the free mobile app.
Josh Hennig here on Game Night. College football, we got lots of action this weekend. The SEC is back in action. And for all your SEC coverage, you want to check out Thinking Out Loud on the SEC Network Monday nights at 8 p.m. One of the members of that show joins us right now on the Boardwalk Honda Hotline. You can follow him on Twitter at Brandon Boykin 2. That's right. The Georgia Bulldog, former Eagles cornerback, joins us right now on the Boardwalk Honda Hotline. Brandon, how you doing this Friday?
I'm good, my man. How you doing?
I'm doing good. Speaking of you being a former Eagle, the Eagles have a lot of injuries. Are you available Sunday night?
Hey, I am available. Tell Howard to give me a call. Tell Howard to hit me up.
I mean, you got about 3 quarterbacks down for the team right now. They only got 3 healthy guys, so I was just wondering if you might be available. So,
yeah, man, I'm available. But no, man, that's really to be expected in 2020. Like with no preseason and no OTAs, like we knew injuries were going to be a factor, and dudes just got to have some depth. And I think the Eagles will get back on track, especially this week for sure.
Well, we're all keeping our fingers crossed because, going 0-3-1 would be a horrible look, and you'd know how the city of Philadelphia is, my friend.
And somehow you still can win the East. Like, that's a good sign, though.
Well, is it a good sign, or is it more like, as you said, it's 2020? So
Right. 2020. We know what 2020 is going to give us. So if it's got to start like this, at least the entire NFC East is doing, like, the same thing. So, things will get better for sure as the camaraderie picks up.
Yeah, I hear you. So you got this new show, Thinking Out Loud, on the SEC Network. Before we get to some of the games and the teams around the SEC, I want to know, how exciting is it for you to be part of this show? I know that there's a bit of a pedigree at ESPN with that show. Guys like Marcus Spears and others that used to be on that show, now they're on new shows, and for you, it's pretty cool. But also, you're getting chomped at by 2 Gators on each side of you. What's going on with that?
Yeah, man, it's a lot of different dynamics going on. Like you said, for me, playing in the SEC, being from Georgia, and then obviously getting drafted to Philly, spending time there, it's cool to come back and talk about the SEC. And, my co-hosts in there, Spencer and RJ, they definitely are Florida guys and writers. So giving me a whole nother perspective, not just from being at a rival school, but like being writers and having to deal with their takes and them coming at me both ways. So it's fun, though. It's enjoyable, and it's a cool experience for sure.
I mean, for me, selfishly, I just like seeing a defensive guy get some shine as a former safety myself. Yeah. So, I mean, I feel like some of these quarterbacks and offensive guys get a little too much TV time. They act like the defensive players don't do any film work either.
Exactly. That, number one, they don't think that we got a space for TV. You know what I'm saying? They think we hit people and we're ugly. So it's cool to be on TV as a defensive guy representing for us. But also, yeah, like you said, to give a defensive perspective. Like we know offense, and there's a lot of quarterbacks on TV, and there's a lot of running backs and receivers. But a guy who plays defense like Marcus Spears did, and me being a corner and being able to play in the secondary, it gives you a whole nother perspective that you can kind of share with fans and teach them football from another angle. So that's the part that I'm enjoying and looking forward to.
Again, it's Thinking Out Loud every Monday night at 8 p.m. Brandon Boykin on the show. That's on the SEC Network. Of course, you could watch it live or do what I do, which is DVR it each week. That way I don't miss out on anything. Brandon, I got to ask you about some of these games around the SEC, these teams. First of all, the SEC being back, we saw a lot of offense out there in week one. As a defensive guy, what are you seeing out there? Is it as much the offense is being good or some of these defenses maybe just not up to par yet?
I think it's a little bit of both. I think what we've seen is like the SEC has transitioned into a passing league, and who would have thought that? But I think that's just football in general. As football transitions, like you're passing the ball more, there's less and less running backs getting carries. And the thing that we're so used to in the SEC is like powerhouse running teams. You know what I'm saying? Guys getting 20 carries a game and just being running back university, no different than Georgia, but that's a transition period. So points are going to be scored for sure, whether we like it or not. Like you can have an amazing defense, but if you're throwing the ball 60 times a game, chances are they might score twice or maybe 3 times. You know what I'm saying? So 20, 25 points is not atypical anymore in the SEC.
Of all the offenses in the SEC, if you could point to one and say that's the one I can't wait to watch each week. I know it's hard to pick one, but I feel like between the Mike Leach offense with Mississippi State, the Lane Kiffin train over there, and Ole Miss, Kyle Trask over there at Florida, you got some choices there.
Yeah, I mean, obviously we all were surprised by what Mississippi State did, and but we also knew that LSU had lost a ton of people, so that might have happened. I want to see how that looks going forward, but obviously that would be like a wow. Florida looks amazing on offense. It looks like they're scoring at will, and they've got dudes all over the field like Grimes and Tony and Kyle Pitts that Trask can get the ball to. And they also have running backs that can catch out of the backfield. But like you said, the Ole Miss team and their offense is what surprised me. Like Matt Corral at quarterback doing what he did, and they also got John Rice Plumlee that can play quarterback but play receiver and do all these different things. And they're moving the ball and scoring. So I'm excited to see these powerhouse offenses kind of go against each other, because that's what people want to see in reality. Like, I know we're defensive guys, but people want to see points being scored. And in the SEC now, you're legit going to see teams scoring a lot, which is fun.
You mentioned Kyle Trask. Is he a legitimate Heisman Trophy candidate?
Well, if we're judging just off week one, he probably already got the award, right? If you take KJ out of the picture, what he did for Mississippi State, but I absolutely think so. I think not just because of what he can do from an ability standpoint, but because his team is very good and they're going to be winning games. And I think not every year, but a lot of times that matters. So if he's putting up those type of numbers and they're also winning and he's a pivotal part of that, I think he definitely will be in the race for sure.
Brandon Boykin joining us here on the Boardwalk Kind of Hotline on 97.3 ESPN. Catch his show Thinking Out Loud, 8 p.m. on Monday nights on the SEC Network. Tomorrow on television on the SEC Network, Missouri at Tennessee at noon, Ole Miss at Kentucky at 4, LSU at Vanderbilt 7:30, and also Arkansas at Mississippi State. That's on the SEC Network Plus side. Brandon, I want to touch on a couple of these games tomorrow with you. I got to start with the noon game. That Missouri team, they pretty much only started playing when Alabama took their foot off the pedal. Tennessee's an interesting team because I don't really know what to expect of them. I mean, I thought that the game between them and the Gamecocks, South Carolina, at night was pretty good. But I mean, is Tennessee legit?
You know what? I was asking myself the same thing. I think that it's a different Tennessee team in terms of them playing 4 complete quarters. Like we saw last year where they lost to Georgia State. They lost to teams early on, and that's because they just completely folded. And I think a lot of that was the quarterback play. And Jared Garantano looked really good this past week. He controlled the game. He controlled the tempo. He didn't turn the ball over. And those are things that he did last year early on as they progressed through the season. It kind of got a little bit better, but they also played multiple quarterbacks. So I think he's trying to establish himself as the guy because they do have a backup and Brian Maurer that can play. And even last year, he was actually beating Alabama and had a huge part of that. So I think they can be legit if the quarterback position is stout and sturdy because that's where it starts for sure.
I mentioned the 4 o'clock game on the SEC Network tomorrow is Ole Miss versus Kentucky. Listen, I love Lane Kiffin on Twitter, but Lane Kiffin in real life's got to win some games to keep getting these jobs. And
oh yeah,
listen, that defense couldn't stop anybody. That offense looked really a lot of fun. So what do you expect for an Ole Miss team going against a Kentucky team that I think was, frankly, really disappointing last week?
Yeah, right. Yeah, I agree. I think defensively, it starts with their pass rush. Like Ole Miss's pass rush last week was bad. It was Kyle Trask had all day to throw the ball, and they just looked tired. They looked tired, and the tempo wasn't that fast to the point where they couldn't get set and blitz the quarterback. So it has to start there. Like you can score like Ole Miss did and Matt Corral throw touchdowns, but if you're giving up points every time you score, you're not going to win, half of those games. That's just how it works. So I think the key for them is defensively, actually. Like they have to get pressure, they have to get turnovers, and that's something that in week one they look really bad doing. So that's the key for Ole Miss, in my opinion.
Here on 97.3 ESPN tomorrow night, the SEC Showdown, Georgia versus Auburn. A lot of eyeballs are going to be on that game. And I got to ask you, what is going on with Georgia, though? Because, they got 3 different quarterbacks. Is Daniels going to play? Is Bennett going to play? Is Mathis going to get back into the lineup? Sometimes they say having too many quarterbacks means you don't have actually any quarterback.
Right, 100%. I think the best thing Georgia has going right now is that they have an experienced defense as they transition in on offense on all sides, right? They had Jake Fromm for the past 3 years, and like he's been the staple of being healthy and consistent from a standpoint of, winning games for Georgia. And now you got to start all over, not just at quarterback, but offensive coordinator and even a whole new offense, right? They're going to kind of like an air raid type thing with Todd Monken. But you can't really have an air raid if you don't have a quarterback to do it. So I think while they fill it out, they have people who are capable, but they just got to fill it out. Like we said, it's 2020. They didn't have spring practice. Camp was kind of cut short, and then you put a freshman quarterback basically in an away game for his first start with a new offense. That's not going to end up well. But I think they'll progress throughout the season, and I actually think DeJuan's going to get another chance to play at some point, and the depth might be something that's going to benefit Georgia down the line.
Of those 3 quarterbacks, do you think a guy makes more sense right now between Mathis, Bennett, and Daniel?
Yep, I do. I think it's the one that's moving the ball. So if it was me, I'd put Stetson Bennett in because, it's an SEC-only schedule. We know no matter the opponent in the SEC, if you're 0-7 or 7-0, like that 0-7 team is just as capable of beating you as any team. That's how the SEC is. So there really is no time to experiment or let people progress, which is crazy to say, but you got to go with what's working. And the game was pretty much dead until Stetson came in and started moving the ball and giving that offense confidence. So I think moving forward, I'd say it was his job to lose as long as he's doing what he did consistently last game.
On the flip side, Auburn, I know a lot of people love to talk about Bo Nix, but I got some concerns about the trenches because you graduated 2 offensive linemen who are now in Philadelphia, one of them being Jack Driscoll, started week 1. And on the defensive side, Dwayne Brown, first-round pick. They also graduated a couple other guys on the defense. So is this a game for Auburn to prove that their trenches are not as thin as maybe someone like me thinks they are?
Absolutely. I think you hit it on the head. Like, people want to know how they're going to reload in those positions that they were so stout at last year. Getting to the quarterback, making pressure on the quarterback. They lost half of their production in sacks and those 2 guys, over more than half of that. So that's something that's got to be replaced. And I think, this is the perfect game. If I'm talking from a non-biased perspective, this is the perfect game for them to show that. Like, Georgia is inconsistent at quarterback play. Georgia's offensive line is young. It's going to be a first home game for them. So there's a lot of things going on for them. And if they can get pressure early, they can kind of dictate the tempo of the game. As we know, Georgia wants to throw the ball, and running it is what they're comfortable doing. But if you're running the ball and not scoring, that clock will be ticking.
Of course, the game tomorrow night can be heard right here on 97.3 ESPN. Coverage begins at 7 o'clock. Auburn versus Georgia, one of the oldest, I think it's the second oldest rivalry in all of college football, going down. 7:30 kickoff for that game. Brandon, one more before I let you go, and I appreciate your time today. Outside the SEC, is there a team or is there a player or is there something that you love watching in college football this year so far that's a non-SEC story?
Non-SEC story. I honestly, it's weird to say, but I'm liking watching Georgia Tech play, even though they've been getting smashed. It's different because when I've watched them play in the past, like obviously it was wing T. They ran the option. So now when you see them play, it's actually football. And even though like they are in a transition period, they got pieces. And I think the rivalry between Georgia and Georgia Tech used to be something special. And if they can kind of get back to a style of playing competitively, which I feel like they've got pieces in the games that I've watched. I think that'll be something in state for Georgia that'll be fun, but they've got to be better defensively for sure. I think Georgia Tech's corner play isn't that great, but running back-wise, they've got talent. Receiver-wise, they've got talent. And then they've even got a young quarterback that's a dual-threat guy. As he grows, I think he'll be better. So I've been watching him, and I'm intrigued with the talent, but it hasn't necessarily transitioned to like winning football yet.
I hear you. I mean, Jeff Sims, he's a freshman, but he shows you little flashes out there. Not just with the running, but he's got an electric arm on him too.
Yeah, exactly. Like he can throw the ball down the field, and he's a little quick to run, but he's kind of. I've seen the progression throughout the past two games of him, like trying to be a little bit more patient, and then also like with a dual quarterback, learning how to slide and get down and protect yourself. And I think he's done a pretty good job of that so far.
He's Brandon Boykin. Catch him on Monday nights, Thinking Out Loud, 8 p.m. Monday nights on the SEC Network. Of course, you can follow him on Twitter at Brandon Boykin2. And as all guests, he appeared here on the Boardwalk on the Hotline here on Game Night on 97.3 ESPN. Brandon, appreciate the time and the conversation. I'll let Howie know that you're available.
Yeah, let Howie know. I'll be able to suit up as long as he has a number 22 available. See you guys, man.
Brandon, take care of yourself.
All right.
Josh Hennig here on Game Night on 97.3 ESPN. Great stuff there from Brandon Boykin. Again, check out the show, Thinking Out Loud. That's 8 p.m. Monday nights on the SEC Network. Game Night here on 97.3 ESPN being brought to you by GMS Law. Make the right call with 4 convenient locations to serve you. Visit them online at gmslaw.com. PlaySugarHouse.com. Text board is open at 609-403-0973 to get on the conversation. We still got my college football picks for this weekend to give you coming up next, as well as looking ahead to the rest of the football weekend. Again, a busy football weekend here on 97.3 ESPN. Little rundown of the games. Tomorrow we have Alabama versus Texas A&M. Coverage begins at 3 p.m., followed by, as I mentioned, the second oldest rivalry in college football, Georgia versus Auburn. Coverage begins at 7 o'clock tomorrow night on 97.3 ESPN. Then on Sunday, we got Cowboys versus Browns at 12:30 begins the coverage. And then Eagles, 49ers. Throwdown. Sunday Night Football. One of the two super injured teams has to win the game, right? We hope it's the Eagles. Find out who. Starting at 8 o'clock on Sunday night right here on 97.3 ESPN. Busy football weekend, of course. Billy Schweim in the locker room, 10 a.m. to noon, Saturday and Sunday. On Sunday, he'll be live on location at All Campus on the Ocean City Boardwalk, broadcasting live himself, Ken Dunnick, and Hunter Brody live on the Ocean City Boardwalk on Sunday. Tomorrow, he's back in the locker room with Scott McKay and himself. They got a lot of stuff to get to football-wise and more. And of course, I'll be on tomorrow, 12 to 2 for Sports Bash Saturday. So a busy weekend, not just football-wise, but with all the shows right here on 97.3 ESPN FM and the 97.3 ESPN mobile app, powered by First Bank of Sea Isle City.
Now, more Game Night with Josh Hennig on 97.3 ESPN and the free mobile app.
Josh Hennig here on Game Night, leading up to 7 o'clock. St. Joe's versus Holy Spirit. The rivalry is renewed for the 2020 high school football season tonight. Mike Gill, Steve Parker on the call, presented by Prime Events. Top of the hour, 7 o'clock right here on 97.3 ESPN. Then following that will be NBA Finals Game 2, Lakers and Heat. So we got high school football today, college football tomorrow, NFL on Sunday. A little bit of normalcy back in our lives, a little extra football in our lives. Thanks again to Brandon Boykin for joining us for a great SEC college football conversation. Again, tomorrow on 97.3 ESPN, an SEC doubleheader, Alabama versus Texas A&M. Coverage begins at 3 p.m. Following that will be Georgia versus Auburn. Oldest rivalry in the SEC, Auburn and Georgia go head-to-head right after Alabama and Texas A&M. SEC doubleheader tomorrow on 97.3 ESPN. PlaySugarHouse.com text board is open, 609-403-0973. To get on the conversation. One of the things that Brandon brought up before I get to the football picks for the weekend and a little preview of the college football slate is he mentioned how the SEC is transitioned to more of a passing league. And I thought that's an interesting point he brought up because in the past, when you went to the SEC, if you're an NFL franchise, you're going out there and you're drafting some of the skill positions like receivers and running backs, but just stay away from the quarterbacks. You'll draft a defensive lineman, you'll draft an offensive lineman, but you didn't always go after the linebackers, right? Maybe you go after the cornerbacks and the safeties, but not as much certain other positions. You know, now the SEC is a well-rounded conference. You can draft anybody at any position. You know, back in the day, you didn't draft the quarterback out of the SEC because either the guy was bloated stats like a guy like Tim Couch or Rex Grossman, or you had basically a mediocre game manager like a Greg McElroy or an A.J. McCarron. Now you have guys like Jalen Hurts and Tua Tagovailoa and Kyle Trask out there. So he's right. The league has changed and it's morphed and it's evolved. And now with guys like Lane Kiffin and Mike Leach down there at Ole Miss and Mississippi State, now you have two schools that are throwing out high-powered offenses. So the SEC has gone from just being traditional smash-mouth football to being a well-rounded football conference. And I hope Brandon is right. I hope the defense catches up a little bit because I don't want to see shootouts all the time. I still love a good, 28, 21 kind of game. Not every game needs to be in the 30s, 40s, and 50s. This ain't the Big 12 all the time. Speaking of the Big 12, we got some college football picks to get to before we wrap out here. Game night here on 97.3 ESPN. Again, coming up top of the hour, St. Joe Academy versus Holy Spirit High School. Head-to-head rivalry renewed. Mike Gill, Steve Parker on the call, presented by Prime Events right here on 97.3 ESPN and the 97.3 ESPN mobile app, powered by First Bank of Sea City. So I mentioned earlier in the show, didn't do so well last week. The picks didn't all pan out. We're now 16-11 on the year. Still winning for the year, but a bit of a down week last week. So we got to bounce back, and we're going to try to bounce back in the biggest way humanly possible. I actually had to get rid of a bunch of picks off of this sheet I got in front of me here because I realized I was going a little ridiculous. I was getting ready to come on here and give you about 12 picks for the weekend, and I realized that I don't know if I can even keep up with all that. I'm the sports geek, right? So let's try to get you some real straightforward picks. I'm going as far as I mentioned in the Big 12. Texas Tech at Kansas State. Now, Kansas State, they last week, you got to watch this because Kansas State now has had 2 straight games that were high scoring. They were supposed to have a good defense coming into the year. That defense looks like they still haven't shown up at all this college football season. They may not even exist. It might have just been a fairy tale. So you look at two arguably the worst defenses in the Big 12. Texas Tech, who got scored up and down the field by Houston Baptist. Kansas State, yeah, they beat Oklahoma, but they've given up a lot of points. Texas Tech has allowed 48 points per game this year, while K-State is averaging 35 points per game against. You got Alex Bowman of the Red Raiders with 7 passing touchdowns of the year, and Wildcats quarterback Skylar Thompson, 6 combined touchdowns on the year. I'm expecting a shootout in this game. I'm saying go over the 64.5. In fact, Kansas State has hit the over in both of their games this year. So this isn't a fluke pick. This is I see what's happening. Texas Tech has also hit the over in both of their games this year. So you have two teams. They've only hit the over this year. They both have horrible defenses. Give me the over 64.5. Speaking of the Big 12, Texas versus TCU. Texas Longhorns defense, as you saw last week, versus Texas Tech is pretty miserable. They really don't do much. In fact, the only reason why they had a couple turnovers in the game last week is because, let's be realistic, Alex Bowman, he's a gunslinger. He just flings it all over the ground. He's like Brett Rippon, just throw it. Hope for the best, right? Well, Bowman's kind of the same way at Texas Tech. The Longhorns defense. Remember they used to have all that talent back there? Guys like Earl Thomas was from Texas, right? Remember B.J. Raji was from Texas? Not anymore. They don't got those guys anymore. They allowed 56 points last week and 331 passing yards versus Texas Tech. I bring up those passing yards specifically because TCU, in their loss last week, they had 400 passing yards on offense, and they scored 34 points in a loss. 34 points, 400 passing yards in a loss. We know Texas will score points with Sam Ehlinger, a quarterback. But if Texas scores around 40 points tomorrow, am I really supposed to believe that a Texas defense that can't really stop almost anything is going to hold TCU to under 23 points? I certainly don't believe it. Let's go over the 63 for TCU and Texas tomorrow. Let's jump back into the SEC. I mentioned this game a little earlier. Missouri at Tennessee. 30-year Tennessee coach Jeremy Pruitt. He's got a group of mostly juniors and seniors this year. That's part of the reason why I was asking Brandon Boykin earlier, listen, is Tennessee real? Like, what am I supposed to do with this team? Well, we saw Jarrett Garatano play well last week versus South Carolina. South Carolina is a better team than Missouri. Missouri allowed 38 points last week to an Alabama team that took their foot off the gas pedal. Alabama just threw out their backups in the fourth quarter. That's why Missouri had the backdoor cover that gave us a loss last week. The Missouri Tigers scored 16 points in the final 16 minutes of the game. They were down 35-3. That's when Alabama pulled half the team off the field in the fourth quarter, right? They got up 35-3 and they say, we got this game in hand. Missouri got all their points in garbage time. Tennessee is in Alabama, which is also a good and a bad thing. It's a good thing for Missouri because you won't be losing 35-3. But Tennessee is in Alabama because they're not going to take their foot off the pedal in the fourth quarter. They're playing 4 full quarters. Tennessee, I think, wins by 2 touchdowns tomorrow. Tennessee is currently minus 11.5 on the line. Give me Tennessee in the points. I think Missouri, between all the losses they had this year due to graduations, due to COVID-19 opt-outs, due to their projected starting quarterback leaving the entire program altogether. He just bailed on Missouri. Give me Tennessee at home with the veterans, with the senior quarterback, with the juniors. Give me the experience and give me the home team. Give me the better team. Take the points, minus 11.5. I want to stay in the SEC. Texas A&M at Alabama. You can hear the action right here on 97.3 ESPN tomorrow, starting at 3 p.m. Alabama put in the backups in the fourth quarter and won 38-19. Contrast that with Texas A&M. They struggled to win 17-12 versus a pretty underwhelming Vanderbilt team. Alabama has the better talent across the board, and there's a lot of speculation out there that the Rolling Tide used Missouri as a warm-up game for their offense, and that tomorrow will be unleash the full power of their offense. At least the rumors going on down in the SEC country. Don't you ever think that Alabama wants to crush an SEC West opponent, and they want to show all those Texas high school kids, don't go to Jimbo Fisher and Texas A&M. Come to Alabama. Dylan Moses, Patrick Surtain on that defense is going to make Texas A&M look bad tomorrow. Give me Alabama the minus 17.5. Jumping over to the AAC, Memphis at SMU. SMU has 3 games already this season compared to Memphis, who has not played since September 5th due to COVID-19 issues. So the Mustang offense is firing on all cylinders, averaging 48.5 points per game, while Memphis has allowed 48 points in a shootout win earlier this year. Give me the quarterback in the offense that has played the last 3 weeks over the team that's been sitting on the sideline. So give me Steve Buechele, the Mustangs offense, and the +2 versus Memphis. I always talk about the academies, right? Navy and Air Force. Air Force currently only has 2 games under schedule until the Mountain West announces their full football schedule. But on offense, you're talking about an Air Force team. They don't have their 2-year starter, Donald Hammond. Give me Navy minus 6.5. One more game for you, Ole Miss. I got them plus 6.5 over Kentucky. Kentucky looked horrible last week. It's an offense that didn't show up, a defense that played poorly. Give me Lane Kiffin and that Ole Miss plus 6. I told you, going a little crazy this week on the college football picks. Josh Hennig on GameNight on 97.3 ESPN, the final sports bash. Keyword right now. Take this word, the 97.3ESPN.com. Wash. Wash your clothes, people. W-A-S-H. Wash your hands. W-A-S-H. Take that word. Go to 97.3ESPN.com or the 97.3 ESPN mobile app for your chance to win up to $10,000. Thanks to Jersey Shore Federal Credit Union.